On the Menard Studio Hotline, we'll talk some baseball. He's with Bleacher Report, MLB Featured Columnist for Bleacher Report. Anthony Witrado is on the Menard Studio Hotline. Anthony, thanks for the time. Before we get into some of the teams and how this first month of the season has played out, I want to get your thoughts on a story that has come down today in regards to the length of the season. And there's some rumblings going on that players are talking about they'd be okay with a shortened season. Not drastically shorter, but the number 154 has been thrown out there as opposed to 162. Your thoughts on the potential of a shorter season?
Yeah, that's been one of the things that players have been sort of, it's not a grumble, it's more of a thing that they would be okay with. And that's kind of been the number that's been thrown out there for, I don't know, the last 10 years or so, very casually, though. Obviously, there hasn't been a movement to shorten the season. And I would imagine probably, something like 80 to 85% of players would probably be completely okay with that. They think the season is, in general, they think the season is too long as it is, and they definitely think spring training is too long. So I think for them, as long as their money isn't affected, they're good with it. It's the owners, I think, that you would have to really convince.
Well, I think you're right. I think that's the key thing. You said the key word there in money, and I think if the owners can be convinced that a shortened season would continue to bring in the money that it brings in now, they may be a little bit more open to doing that. I don't know if you can make that happen or not, and I don't know that really shortening it by, what would that be, eight games? Does that make that world of a difference? I think if you're going to shorten it, why not knock it down about 20 games?
Yeah, look, for these owners, when they're counting chips, it all matters. If you took one day away from them, it's going to matter. It never comes out all the time publicly, but as reporters at stadiums, we hear it from time to time. When there's a rain out or when something like the situation in Baltimore happens, those owners are not happy when they lose home dates, even if it's one game. They throw a fit, and there's not much they can do about it because it ends up being, Major League Baseball's call. But they don't like that at all. So if you're talking about, let's say 4 home dates, it's going to be something that you're going to have to fight with them over, and that's just the way it's going to go. But I think it's a good idea. We should not, even if the season does start, April 5th, April 6th, the regular season should never bleed into October. I think that's the playoff month, and for any regular season to go into that deep, it doesn't need to happen that way. And I think baseball understands that, and they're trying to get rid of it because, you know what, you don't want World Series if they go to 7 games to bleed into November either.
Well, on a little bit on the controversy side now, I guess controversy is a word for it. A-Rod back in the game, actually playing very well in the first month of the season. But he surpasses Willie Mays now with his 661st. And all the talk now is New York is not going to pay this $6 million bonus. They're not even saying that we're thinking about it. They just said we're not going to pay it. Is that... Have you heard any rumblings out of the Players Union or out of the Yankees organization or both of what angle this is going to take and your thought on it?
Yeah, well, the GM, Brian Cashman, came right out and said it, about a week ago that we're not going to pay it. And the Players Union has said the entire time, if they don't pay it, we are going to step in. And so, I think that's coming. I think before any litigation or anything like that comes, the Players Union is going to try to rectify this thing themselves with the Yankees. But from the Yankees side, they are saying it's not as black and white as everybody has reported, when the contract was signed, that no matter what, we have to pay this bonus. From the Yankees side, the way they say the contract is laid out is that if they choose to market the milestone and can, make some money off of it and have games, then they'll pay the bonus. And they're saying, well, we didn't market it, so, that doesn't count. But whether that's true or not, the union and Alex Rodriguez can argue that it was marketed because you had things like third-party entities breaking into live coverage to show A-Rod's at-bats.
Yep.
It was talked about ad nauseum on several outlets. It's been written about like no other story this season except for maybe Chris Bryant. So whether the Yankees like it or not, whether they did anything to promote it or not, it was a source of attention for that club. And so, there's a really good argument there that if the language of the contract is as the Yankees say, they still have to pay because it was promoted and it was marketed.
I agree 100%. We discussed that, I think it was earlier this week or late last week, and I said very similar to what you just said there, that whether they wanted it to be marketed or not, it got marketed for the exact same reasons you mentioned. It was on SportsCenter. It was on Fox Sports Live. It was a thing, whether the Yankees wanted it to or not. They chose not to promote it, but regardless, there's some things beyond their control, and it was the fact that it was making headlines online and on nightly news and sportscasts all across the country and on ESPN and everywhere else. So, yeah, I think you're 100% right. I don't know that they've got much of a leg to stand on. I know they'll fight it tooth and nail, but I think there may be the Players Union and A-Rod may have a pretty solid leg to stand on as well. Anthony Witrado from Bleacher Report, MLB Featured Columnist, joining us on the Menard Studio Hotline. It's Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville 105.3 and online, ESPNEvansville.com. Where we sit here in our part of the country, Anthony, we sit down in the southern part of Indiana. We've got a huge contingent of St. Louis Cardinals fans. We've also got a pretty sizable contingent of Chicago Cubs fans. We're kind of right in the thick of that rivalry that's been so good for baseball for so long. What do you make of the Cubs? We actually happen to be a Cubs affiliate, so full disclosure there, but it doesn't really make us any difference what your opinion happens to be. But as far as, you don't have to be gentle or anything like that. Obviously, they've got the young talent with Soler. They've got Chris Bryant. They've got Addison Russell, but that pitching has just not been what they need it to be. Can they get that turned around before it gets out of hand?
I think there's going to be ups and downs with both parts of that club. I think anytime you're relying on a core group of hitters, a core group of your lineup that is that young and that inexperienced at the major league level, you're going to go through that growing process and those growing pains. And I think that, you'll see them over the course of the summer where they're not scoring a lot or they can't get runners in from scoring position. You're going to see those kinds of things. And you see them with veteran ball clubs also. But with that rotation, it's probably going to get better, but I don't think it's going to be great. The John Lester signing was nice, but there's a reason they were able to get him for $155 million and not $210 like Scherzer got, because you look at the track record for Lester, and it's good, but it's not great. Last year was his best season, but you look at it before that, and there were a lot of ups and downs. There were a lot of months where that ERA was in the 5s. There were years when that ERA was in the 4s. So to call him an ace, I think is valid, but to say that he's that kind of game changer, that kind of rotation changer, a Kershaw, a Verlander in his prime, a Scherzer now, I think that's going a little too far. So while he's a solid and a definitive number one starter, he's not going to be the guy that grabs that rotation by the collar and leads it into the postseason. I think this team is capable of finishing above 500. I don't think they're a playoff club yet. I think next season you're really going to see them kind of come on.
Well, the John Lester thing, some people are using the argument, I guess would be the thing, using the argument maybe that coming from the American League to the National League is an adjustment period, so he's going to start off slow and whatnot. Is there that big a difference from the American League to the National League for pitchers?
Yeah, it should be easier.
Well, that was kind of my thought, too, yeah.
Yeah, it should definitely be easier. That's not that adjustment period thing. I don't think is that's what spring training is for. You're adjusting to a new club. You're adjusting to whatever you have to adjust to. So no, it's just John Lester is struggling, and he's not doing the things that he did last year to be as effective. And so there's no excuse for it other than that. And even if he was in the American League and struggling like this, it wouldn't matter. Look, you're being paid like an ace. You're expected to be an ace, but history tells us he's a very borderline ace. And he just happened to be the guy that the Cubs could afford. And for their front office, he was a guy they knew. So they knew going in what they were getting. They were just hoping that he was finally hitting his stride because, like I said, last season was his best all-around year. And they were hoping that they were going to milk a lot of that, and so far it hasn't been the case.
Anthony Witrado from Bleacher Report joining us on the Menard Studio Hotline. It's Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville 105.3 and online, ESPNEvansville.com. On the flip side, the Cardinals obviously playing very, very good baseball. Is this something they can sustain through the rest of the year despite not having Adam Wainwright, their ace, for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I think they can. I do think they're going to have to go and make a move, though. I think they're going to need another pitcher. It doesn't necessarily have to be an ace like Cole Hamels, but it has to be somebody solid. You know, they may make a move for Scott Kazmir. They may make a move for a guy like Jeff Samardzija, somebody like that. Because I think the concern is, well, Martinez and Waka and Lynn have been good. You do wonder if Lynn can carry them through a postseason. And you have to be concerned about the innings limitations on guys like Martinez and Waka, you know, coming off an injury or whether they just haven't thrown that many innings before in their careers. And if they make it, you know, if this is a team capable of making a deep postseason run, there's a reason why these pitchers go up incrementally year to year in terms of their innings until they, you know, are capable of throwing 200 plus every year. It's because their arms they're not conditioned to do those kinds of things, and you definitely have to be worried about both of those other guys, Walker and Martinez, possibly hitting a wall. And if that's the case, then I think the Cardinals absolutely do have to go make a move. It doesn't have to be for a guy like Wainwright, you know, that caliber of a pitcher, but it has to be somebody that can give them innings every single time they take the ball.
Which one of the teams, and looking at the entire league in general, what team has been out there that has done much better than you expected them to start this season?
Well, this might sound a little crazy because they won the pennant last year, but I think it's the Royals. I definitely didn't think that they would be this kind of sort of, you know, offensive juggernaut. I thought they were going to be able to pitch, and obviously that bullpen is great. But when you look at what they've done offensively, I mean, this was a club that couldn't crack 100 home runs last year, and their OPS was not very good, and they just had all kinds of problems up and down that lineup. It looks like now all the guys that they've counted on for years and years to make leaps and progressions are finally starting to do that. And for them, that's huge because that rotation isn't great. The bullpen is, so they needed to supplement that somehow, especially with them losing James Shields. And what they've gotten offensively from that lineup has been really surprising, I think, for a lot of people.
Talking with Andrew Witrado from Bleacher Report, talking some baseball. It's Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville 105.3. Could the Houston Astros be this year's Kansas City Royals?
I don't see that. You know, for as bad as James Shields was in the postseason last year, he was really good in September. And we're talking about a guy who had already had 180 plus innings on his arm at that point. So the Astros don't have that kind of guy right now. And I don't know if one exists for them anytime in the near future. Mark Appel's good, and if they bring him up, but he's not that kind of guy. And again, innings limitations on a guy like that. So, I think they're definitely showing the progress of stacking those prospects and those draft picks, and starting to see some fruit from that. But I don't think that they are quite that team. You know what they've really benefited from is that the teams like the Mariners, the Angels, and the A's have really played down and below expectations. So, you know, they're kind of there. And you look at them, and their record is good, but it's not great. And if some of those other teams, I think, can get right, you're probably going to see them run back and catch the Astros. But, you know, that franchise isn't too far off from being a real contender.
Jumping over to the National League, the Washington Nationals themselves are a team that I think a lot of people, they've got the talent there, but have kind of underperformed. They're currently sitting one game under 500 right now. Can they get it turned around?
Yes, absolutely. And I think you're already starting to see signs of it. You know, they kind of caught up to the pack again, and they're pulling close to the Mets. And I think eventually they do win that division. I think they're just too deep, too talented, and their pitching is too good. But they're another surprise. You know, kind of like the Royals' offense, the fact that the Nationals have been so bad in several different aspects, you know, has been surprising. But they're going to turn it around. They're too good not to, and we've already started to see them start to do it.
You know, there's a lot of talk, too, like everybody, the first couple of weeks of the season, it's you talk about guys having slumps or a team doing better than expectations, and and it's like, well, we're only X number of games in, or we're only X number of weeks in. For you, what point do we stop using that as an excuse? Like, when do we finally get a pretty good read on what these teams are going to be?
I think probably over the next few weeks. You can still have a team like the Astros in first place right now and not necessarily have them make the playoffs. But I think you're starting to now see, while it's not everything is ripe, you're starting to see the turns. Again, Washington, the Atlanta Braves are a team that you're starting to see turn. The San Francisco Giants starting to kind of come back to life, I think. You're seeing these things sort of play out how you kind of expect them to, at least in some form. But it is still early. I think, though, 3 weeks from now, you're really going to get an idea of how things are going to shape up, and you're going to get a taste of what teams are. And if, say, a team like the Nationals, if they're struggling in 3 weeks still, and they're still, a handful of games behind the Mets, then it's time to. It's reason for concern, I think, and because at that point you're starting to see what teams are.
It's Anthony Witrado from Bleacher Report, MLB Featured Columnist. You can also follow him on Twitter at @Witrado. Anthony, thanks for the time. Appreciate it. Great stuff, and enjoy your weekend.
Yeah, anytime, guys. You too.